An 82-year-old woman in North Carolina spent 9 days trapped in her own bathtub, kept alive by nothing more than an occasional trickle from the cold tap. Lambert Woollingham here with the Daily Shear for Monday, the 13th of July, 2026. Today's issue carries a $6.6 billion Austin budget built on a property tax hike pinned exactly at the legal limit, an oil market reacting to a closed Strait of Hormuz, and a coalition of state attorneys general moving to block the merger of Paramount and Warner Brothers Discovery. Closer to home, the region's biggest institutions all seem to be quietly renegotiating who foots the bill. Austin City Manager T.C. Broadnax has submitted a $6.6 billion operating budget for the coming fiscal year, and it leans hard on property owners to close a $26 million structural deficit. The plan calls for a 3.5% property tax rate increase, and that number is not an accident. It sits exactly at the ceiling state law allows before the city would have to ask voters for permission. Most of the new spending goes toward utility maintenance and infrastructure, meant to keep pace with the region's population growth, particularly power and water systems already straining under corporate relocations. Discretionary programs get whatever is left over, which in a budget of this size is not much. The document treats keeping the lights on and the water running as the only line items Austin can no longer treat as optional. The Austin Independent School District billed the public more than $172,000 in fees to fulfill public records requests over the past year, according to internal billing logs obtained by the Austin Current. Journalists, parents, and community advocates were charged across hundreds of individual requests simply to see the district's own communications and financial data. State law does allow agencies to recover the cost of compiling records, but transparency advocates argue the pricing has crossed into something closer to a toll booth on Civic Scrutiny. The district can still call this compliance, since technically nothing here breaks any law. It simply means finding out what your school district is doing now comes with a bill attached. Contract talks between Capital Metro's private operator, Keolis, and its unionised bus drivers and mechanics resumed Tuesday with a strike authorisation already sitting on the table. Workers voted overwhelmingly to authorise a walkout, and their complaints go beyond wages to inadequate training programs and a shortage of buses that actually run. Employees argue those maintenance gaps, not just scheduling, are why service across the system keeps slipping. If Tuesday's session fails, the stoppage would immediately shut down the routes thousands of Austin commuters rely on every day. For a transit agency already known for missed trips, a strike would mostly formalise what regular riders already suspect about the schedule. City officials in Corpus Christi have disclosed that residents and small businesses spent years subsidising roughly $100 million in water discounts handed to major industrial users, including the energy company Valero. When the arrangement came to light, the city eliminated the discount, and the industrial customers responded by suing for an $80 million retroactive refund. So the same corporations that spent years paying artificially low water rates are now arguing in court that they were the ones overcharged. The dispute pits the city's residential rate structure against the accounting departments of some of the Gulf Coast's most profitable refineries. A ruling either way will decide who was actually footing the water bill along the Texas coast. The port of Corpus Christi has entered exclusive negotiations with the global logistics operator DP World to build a new shipping container terminal, aiming to become just the second major container port in Texas. Port commissioners are betting on a coming surge in international container volumes and the terminal is designed explicitly to chip away at the freight dominance the Port of Houston currently holds over the region. If the agreement closes, Corpus Christi would shift from a specialized energy export hub into a full logistics gateway for consumer goods. The negotiations are still exclusive, not signed, which in port development terms means construction is still mostly conceptual. For now, Houston keeps its monopoly a little longer. Beyond City Hall, the money problems get bigger and considerably less local. The European Commission is drafting legislation that could impose age restrictions or an outright ban on social media access for children and teenagers across all 27 member states. The move follows a critical expert panel report, and Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says formal rules could be proposed within months. Under the plan, platforms would have to prove their algorithms and interfaces are not psychologically harmful before children are allowed on them at all, which reverses the usual burden of proof this industry has enjoyed for 2 decades. It is the kind of requirement that assumes technology companies can, in fact, prove a negative. American platforms currently built entirely around unrestricted youth engagement would need an entirely new business model to comply. Global investment in artificial intelligence data centers is on pace to top $700 billion this year, and the strain on memory chip and semiconductor supply is now showing up in retail prices for ordinary laptops. Economists say the demand for processing power has squeezed manufacturing pipelines hard enough that consumer electronics buyers are absorbing the difference. The infrastructure itself is also power-hungry enough that regional utilities are raising baseline electricity rates for residential customers just to keep the servers running. So the bill for the artificial intelligence boom is arriving in 2 places at once: the electronics aisle and the monthly power bill, and neither charge mentions artificial intelligence anywhere on it. The proposed merger between Paramount and Warner Brothers Discovery, valued at $111 billion, is now facing a coordinated lawsuit from a coalition of state attorneys general, with a filing expected as early as this week. The picture has changed since this deal last came up, arriving just days after Oregon's Attorney General quietly dropped a separate inquiry into the same merger. The multi-state coalition intends to argue that combining 2 of the world's largest media companies would restrict competition and push subscription prices higher. Some of this reporting comes via Matt Stoller, who covers merger enforcement closely. Oregon's exit did not end the scrutiny, it just changed which officers are doing the scrutinizing. Benchmark crude prices jumped as much as 5% on Monday after a weekend of direct military exchanges between the United States and Iran, pushing energy contracts well above their pre-war levels. The spike was sealed by Tehran's declaration that it had closed the Strait of Hormuz to all commercial shipping. The United States continues to carry out retaliatory airstrikes aimed at Iranian launch capabilities, but commodity traders have already concluded that military strikes do not reassure a commercial tanker captain. Roughly 1/5 of the world's daily oil consumption normally moves through that strait, and none of it is currently moving through an active combat zone. The market, unlike the diplomats, has already priced in how long that arrangement is expected to last. Taiwan's semiconductor manufacturing company reported net revenue of $13.2 billion in June alone, a 67% surge that blew past Wall Street's already aggressive projections ahead of its formal earnings report. Because nearly every major American technology company depends on the Taiwanese foundry to physically manufacture its chip designs, the company's ledger is the clearest available window into how hot the artificial intelligence build-out actually is. The number suggests that concerns about global trade friction have done essentially nothing to slow corporate spending on computing capacity. It is a remarkable amount of money to earn in a single month for a company most of its customers have never heard of. Overseas and in Washington, today's stories trade market anxiety for something more physical. Leaked intelligence has confirmed that Israeli operatives spent years cultivating former Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad as a secret intelligence asset, according to operational briefings described in the reporting. The campaign, described as a mix of psychological and financial grooming, aimed to turn one of Iran's most hardline former officials into a quiet channel into Tehran's political hierarchy. The operation nearly reached a physical extraction during the early days of the current regional war, when agents reportedly planned to smuggle Ahmadinejad out of the country to a safe house. That final step collapsed before it happened, but the years of groundwork that preceded it apparently did not. The operation is public now only because the last step of it failed. Senator Mitch McConnell has confirmed that a fall, not a heart attack, was behind his recent unannounced hospitalization, ending weeks of institutional silence about his condition. The 84-year-old Kentucky Republican said he briefly lost consciousness during the fall and was treated for a mild case of pneumonia before his release. He has since moved to a rehabilitation facility, and his office says he intends to return to his Senate duties, though it declined to offer any actual timetable. The admission arrived only after public speculation about his condition had already outpaced anything his office was willing to confirm. The Senate's senior Republican leadership remains, for now, an open question with no return date attached. At least 27 people were killed when a fast-moving fire tore through a crowded entertainment venue in northern Bangkok. Security footage and dispatch logs show the blaze erupting near the front entrance, cutting off the main exit and trapping patrons inside a highly combustible interior. Most of the victims were found clustered in the building's restrooms where they had fled, trying to escape the smoke and heat. Thai authorities have opened an investigation into the venue's safety compliance, including how a commercial space of that size operated without functional emergency exits or fire suppression. The inquiry will determine how a building meant to hold a crowd offered so few ways for that crowd to leave it. South Carolina has moved fast to fill the Senate seat left vacant by the death of Senator Lindsey Graham, scheduling a special Republican primary for August 11th. That timeline gives candidates only a few weeks to build a statewide campaign, a compression that was not part of the picture when this story first broke. In the meantime, the governor holds sole authority to appoint a temporary replacement who would serve and cast votes until early January. The fast-tracked process means 3 decades of Graham's influence over the state's political machinery will effectively be redistributed before the end of summer. The Senate's math and alliances shift accordingly, whether the chamber is ready for it or not. In North Carolina, an 82-year-old woman named Joan Rivet is recovering after being rescued from her own bathtub, where she had been trapped for 9 days following a fall. Unable to stand or reach a phone, she drifted in and out of consciousness while waiting for someone to notice she was missing. She kept herself hydrated by using her foot to nudge open the cold water tap, splashing water onto her face rather than drinking any measurable amount. Her survival is now being cited by health officials as a case study in the risks facing elderly Americans who live alone with no one checking in. She was, in the end, rescued by someone finally noticing an absence, which is a lower bar than most emergency systems are designed to require. What stays with me is that $172,000 invoice for public records in Austin. Somewhere in that district's finance office, there is presumably a line item for the fee itself, and if there is a line item, someone had to file a request to learn what that line item costs. And if you follow that down far enough, there is eventually a single overworked records clerk billing a taxpayer $4.50 to learn what it costs to ask what things cost. I would like to see the invoice for that invoice. At some point, the district will realise it can save money by simply mailing the bill to itself and cutting the public out of the transaction entirely. That is the day. Nothing here concluded. It simply generated more paperwork, noting that it had not concluded. Lambert Woollingham, still trying to work out how many county clerks it would take to properly invoice this newsletter for reading it aloud. The day has been shorn until tomorrow.